Okay, we'll get started. Loretta, if you could monitor the waiting room, that would be great. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the October listening sessions for the California Truth and Healing Council. We've adjusted our listening schedule and we'll have general listening sessions today from 1 to 2:30 and this Wednesday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. And then we'll hold a regular business meeting of the council Friday at 1 p.m. We encourage you all to attend the council meeting Friday to engage directly with the council members. My name is Christina Snyder, and I'm a member of the Dry Creek Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians and the tribal advisor for Governor Gavin Newsom. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that the land I'm joining you from is the ancestral homelands of the Cahuilla, Luiseno, Quiche, and Tongva peoples. I'm now going to briefly walk through some of the logistics for today's session. First, we are recording this listening session and it's available for public participation via Zoom and dial-in. The recording and summary notes will be available on the CTHC web landing page and blog when they're ready. For those interested in following the council, ongoing updates, including listening session recordings and the listening session summary documents, are available at the California Truth and Healing Council updates blog at catruthandhealing, all spelled out, .com. You can also get updates for events by following the Governor's Office of the Tribal Advisor on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Additional details, including meeting dates, agendas, background information, and other materials are available at tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC. If you've not already done so, we'd appreciate if you could update your name to let us know who you are. And as we get into the discussion portion of today's session, we'd appreciate if those that are comfortable could go on camera. We're going to start with brief introductions of those of you who have joined us. And then as always, we'll go into a quick overview to get everyone up to speed on the recent updates. And then we'll go into the listening and discussion portion of today's convening. If you'd like to speak at any point, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. If you're using the Zoom app, you should be able to raise your hand using the app controls, but you can also use Alt-Y in Windows or Option-Y on Mac to raise or lower your hand. If you've dialed in, you should be able to raise your hand by pressing *9. You may also email written comments at any time to info@catruthandhealing.com at your convenience. Now, before we begin, I'd like to remind participants that all of our council members, council staff, and many of you are members of the victim population in need of collective healing. So I ask that you engage with the council, our office, and each other with respect and with your whole heart in a healing mindset. Many of us doing this work are navigating systems that were not built for us to make change that was never contemplated. This in itself takes an enormous amount of patience and emotional integrity, and we're all doing our best to make strides in these spaces. So thank you again for joining us. And now I will turn it over to Councilmember Lucas first, if you'd like to say any words to the group.
You always surprise me when you do that. I don't know why, but anyway, thank you. And it's good to see everybody. I don't have anything yet to say. I just, again, would like to encourage people to participate and share their views. I'm interested primarily in the elders up and down the state and hearing from them. And I've been reading some of the testimony on the termination of took place in the early 50s. I'd be interested in knowing whether or not we have any listeners or viewers that are from that generation that remember that activity. I'd like to kind of hear what they have to say. The other thing I wanted to make note of was that I noticed in San Diego newspaper that the governor gave back some land on Bruce's Beach in Manhattan. I think that's something we should look into. I recognize and I want to honor the family that it went back to, but I want to remind them that it was also California Indian land before it was their land. My main point on that is if he can give that back, then certainly he can give back a lot of the other land, particularly in state parks where they're under management, don't have enough management to take care of the cultural resources. So we got a lot of Indians out there that might be interested in taking over that management. So outside of that, I'd just like to acknowledge today on a spiritual level, we got some rain and some fog and some cold, and it was 39 degrees. We could have had snow very easily in San Diego. And again, thank you. And thank you for everybody who's participating in this. I think it's terribly important. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. I'll now turn it over to staff to introduce themselves. Loretta, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Loretta Miranda. I currently serve as Chief Deputy Tribal Advisor and Special Counsel for the Tribal Advisor's Office. And I'm a descendant of the Morongo Band of Mission Indians. I'm Serrano and Cupeño, currently joining you from the ancestral homelands of the Cahuilla people. I'm happy to be here and looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Loretta. And we've also got Michael Park on, who you can introduce yourself or you can just stay on. And he is our in our office and helps Loretta and I keep our heads straight. So if you have anything that you'd like to chat with us about or to think about with the council, feel free to directly message Michael and we can discuss that. At this time, if there's anyone who'd like to introduce themselves to the group, you can go ahead at this time before we go into the presentation. And we ask that you just, if you're comfortable, go on camera just so that we can have more of a community feeling. But if not, you're totally fine with staying off camera as well. So we'll give it a couple minutes if folks want to introduce themselves to the group.
Good afternoon. I'm Stephanie Weldon. I am a Yurok tribal member. I'm Yurok, Tolo, and Crook, and I'm calling from my ancestral homelands of both the Yurok and Wiyot people right on the border in Humboldt County. Happy to be here. I also contract and work for California Department of Social Services as an ICWA specialist. So I'm here just to listen and to learn and just hear what folks have to say. So I'm really grateful. This weekend I attended the reclaiming and renaming of one of our ancestral villages, Sume. That's how we were taught to say it in our family. And I grew up dancing there. My children grew up participating in ceremonies there. So it was really good to be back in, a place where it's significant to our family, be renamed to our own language. Thank you. And it's raining here too.
Thank you, Stephanie. We really appreciate it. If anyone else would like to introduce themselves at this time, feel free.
Hi, this is Teddy Simon She/Her. I'm the Indigenous Justice Advocate at the ACLU of Northern California, and just excited to see the ways in which, as a nonprofit NGO, we can support the really exciting work of the council.
Awesome. Welcome back, Teddy. If anyone else would like to introduce themselves at this time.
Saludos all here, holding space and representing the Native American Liaison Branch and Core Office with Caltrans, Andrea Coahuilteca, and just honored to be here with you all. Sending love. Thank you.
Thank you. And so for those of you that are not stateside, we've got a couple of our stateside tribal liaisons, Native advocates, and tribal advisors in the room as well, so that we can think about how the state can do better. So a really good opportunity if folks have ideas in the space of Caltrans or in the space of child welfare and social services, which are both very much in need of some additional assistance, at least in the space of truth and healing. If others would like to introduce themselves to the group.
You can also introduce yourself in the chat too, if you'd like. We'll be monitoring the chat as well.
Okie doke. Well, we'll have also opportunities throughout this listening session for all of you to engage as well. So we're going to get into this a presentation. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we're going to start with some of the principles that, let me get this on slide view. My laptop is not cooperating with me today. Okay, can you see that?
Yep, it looks good.
Great. So what we're going to start with today are some of the principles that the council voted on to incorporate into this work. So we're going to start with some of the respectful meeting principles, just so that everybody's kind of up to speed on the approach that the council is taking in these meetings. And we kind of level set about how folks are engaging in these spaces, so that we're both bringing our whole selves here, but also not impacting others who are here to heal as well. So in order to create a space where participants feel welcomed, respected, and able to speak comfortably, we're going to uphold the following principles in all convenings of the council. We ask that all participants, including council members, authorized representatives, staff, moderators, and the public, work towards sharing in their stewardship. If you're a participant in a convening with the council, we ask that you engage in the work of the council and with others in an open and respectful way. Engage in behaviors that will make others feel welcome. Take care of your emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical well-being, and seek support as you need it. What does respectful engagement mean? It means affirm the person and critique the ideas. Provide feedback constructively and with the intent for mutual growth and healing. Welcome feedback and challenges to your opinions. So the ideas sit separately from the person, and we need to remember that in order for us to work together toward mutual understanding and healing and talk about some of these really difficult things, that we need to make sure that we are not making personal attacks when folks are expressing ideas and looking at each other for feedback. Avoid contributing to assumptions or generalizations about tribes, tribal communities, or other groups. Do not ask individuals to speak for their perceived group. Speak only for yourself. So that's the principle that even our council members, they're all here as individuals and not necessarily representatives of their communities or tribes. Offer participants the benefit of the doubt. Spirited discussions are expected on these topics. See this as a sign that folks are engaged and care, and remember to be respectful as you speak, read, and listen. Honor confidentiality. Do not share others' experiences or information without permission. We're going to have a lot of topics and experiences and stories that come up in the context of this work that are going to be very difficult for people to share. So as we move forward, we need to make sure that those people feel safe in that sharing is not going to go outside of their intended audience, and that their stories are not going to be used in contexts that they don't agree for them to be used in. So as folks share, just please make sure that you're not passing along those stories as your own or using them for any other sort of anything outside of the context of what was originally intended. Assume that you have relative privileges and both explicit and implicit biases. And this is kind of across the board, that you can have privileges and biases regardless of where you come from and what your background is. Know that others may or may not have had similar opportunities, experiences, and background as you. Recognize that their contributions are equally valuable. For those from dominant identity groups that are engaging in this work, refrain from contributions that prioritize dominant experiences over those who have been marginalized. Welcoming behavior, what does that look like? Make behavioral adjustments for virtual communication. If you wouldn't say something to someone's face, refrain from saying it virtually by voice or text. In the Zoom era, behavior has changed a bit. And so I think it's just much more important in the context of this work for everybody to be thinking about, if I were in person with this person, would I be saying these same words? Would I have this same tone? Would I feel as comfortable saying the things that I'm saying, even though I'm sitting in my home? Know that use of strong language, capital letters, and exclamation marks can easily be misinterpreted online as unwelcome yelling or aggressive behavior. And especially in the context of this work, where everybody is coming here with something that has been damaging, both now and in the past. It's just very important to be respectful of the fact that people are here and maybe more sensitive because of the kind of work we're engaging in here. Remember that tone does not carry via text. People might not realize that you're joking or being sarcastic. Leave space for others to engage and express comments and ideas if you have spoken recently, by letting people finish their thoughts before adding new ones. Personal well-being. Take steps to ensure your physical comfort. Some examples in virtual meetings include shift your sitting, standing position often, take a purposeful deep breath regularly, raise your eyes to look beyond the screen, or sit back from the computer when possible to relieve eye strain. Keep a glass of water nearby and take sips throughout sessions. Please consider physically leaving the computer during breaks. Participate as you're able to and adjust your presence as needed, whether that is turning off video or stepping away entirely. It's not expected that all participants will or should be present for the entirety of the council's work. We know and support that you will take time to eat, take care of your families and pets, but be aware that virtual convenings will be recorded and available to the public. Set up supportive resources such as food, water, ergonomics, and privacy while offloading responsibilities if possible in advance of convenience. Plan for breaks and stick to them. Seek support from your own networks or from provided resources as needed. And please alert our staff as to any concerns as soon as possible. We recognize that participants bring their entire selves and histories with them to the council, and that topics explored during the course of this work may stimulate emotions and thoughts that would benefit from accompaniment and support. Although trauma responses can come from a variety of sources and contexts, the council understands that those who have experienced disparate treatment due to their Native identities may specifically want to seek assistance related to historical trauma and related issues discussed with the council. Council staff will be providing some supportive resources for participants to be available for the duration of the council's work. So now we're going to go into the regular agenda for today's listening session. And we'll start, as always, with an overview of the council and its charge. We'll go through the October council meeting agenda. We'll then go through each subcommittee by subcommittee, and discuss some of the things that have come up in those contexts, but really want to hear from all of you about what you want to see out of those subcommittees, how you'd like to see them structured, what would be most helpful for you in engaging in those subcommittees. And then we'll talk about the regional meetings that are going to be starting in March of next year, and the how we structure those, how we think about different programming around those meetings. And then we'll open up for listening and discussion, which should be kind of throughout this. So what is the California Truth and Healing Council? The California Truth and Healing Council is a council made up of representatives from California Native American tribes. It's charged with bearing witness to, recording, examining existing documentation of, and receiving California Native American narratives to clarify the historical relationship between the state and California Native Americans in the spirit of truth and healing. The council will submit a final report of findings to the governor's office by 2025. The final report should reflect a holistic understanding of the historical relationship between California Native Americans and the state, and may also make recommendations aimed at reparation and restoration, and consider how to prevent similar depredations or policies in the future. The council is organized under a charter and is made up of voting members and non-voting members. There are 12 voting members from each of the 4 regions, with 1 seat for a non-federally recognized designee in each region. Each region has an alternate voting member to ensure quorum for action. The public is welcomed and encouraged to all available methods for participation, including attending and observing all meetings of the council, submitting written statements to the council, making oral statements and testimony to the council, participating in interactive dialogues, panel discussions, and informal meetings, organizing and hosting affiliate events on issues relevant to the work of the council. And we'll talk about that a bit in the context of planning around the in-person meetings, and joining the work of the subcommittees. And we'll talk about that a bit too in the context of the subcommittees. If you're a California Native American tribe, and those are the tribes that are on the NAHC contact list, we're seeking to begin initial consultation meetings. Please reach out to info.tribalaffairs@gov.ca.gov if your tribe is ready to meet. We're flexible about the method and mode of meetings, and meetings will be recorded and transcribed. Tribes can share as much or as little as they're comfortable with. And then outside of tribal consultation, the council and our office are available to meet with Native American individuals, organizations, and groups at their request. One thing right now is because we're in still a strange place with COVID-19 and the Delta variant, we are not really doing in-person meetings, but we can be flexible if that's the desired initial step. And we would probably require, certain baseline minimums like vaccinations, masks, outdoors where possible. So we're not saying no across the board, but we are saying that we are trying to be very careful, especially as we enter into flu season and the colder seasons and holidays as well. So this year, there's 2 more meetings, and we were going to cancel them because we weren't sure if we could do virtual, but then the legislature stepped up and we can continue to do virtual. And then we also think it's helpful for the council to continue to meet to just keep momentum going, touch base with the community. And we'll continue to have listening sessions throughout this work. So those will not ever not happen. But so the next meeting is this Friday, October 22nd at 1 p.m. and then November 19th. And then for December, with the holidays and with us planning for the next, the calendar cycle, we will not have a council meeting for December. That said, what we'd like to do now that the council has most of its business and baseline process out of the way, we'd like for the public to come and engage throughout the agenda rather than just coming at 3 for items off of the agenda. So we've structured the agenda a bit differently this time, which I'll talk about next. So for this, and this actually is not the full agenda, so I apologize, I'll have to update this, but let me actually pull up the agenda and I can share that. Okay.
And I just put a link to the agenda in the chat.
Awesome, thank you. And I'll go ahead and share it as well. And let me know, Loretta, when you can see that.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so the agenda for this Friday, we'll start with welcome, roll call, traditional opening. And again, as always, if there are members of the community and of the public who'd like to do the traditional opening, we welcome your joining us and we can give you presenter credentials to do so. We'll then have council member updates, and this is where council members can share with the council and the rest of the public on any conversations they've had, any progress they've had that has been outside of the context of the subcommittees and the council work. We'll then go over the consultation request that's going out this week and the timeline for responses. And then we'll go through the subcommittee updates and ask for community input. And this is the part of the agenda that I was mentioning where we really want to have both updates from the council members themselves, but we also want to invite community input about what should be the priorities of these different subcommittees. So we'll start with the funding partnership subcommittee and give an update on the new partnership with Decolonizing Wealth Project, but then also this partnership Subcommittee is going to be tasked with prioritizing a fund for community engagement with the council. So in the near term, the two things that this funding partnership subcommittee will be focused on, which I'll touch on in a minute as well, is standing up that fund and thinking through what are uses of that fund that can help folks engage with the work of the council, whether it's one tribe wants some funds to be able to digitize their archives to be able to send it into the council, or another tribe would like some resources to be able to pull in all of the archives, pull in all of the narrative, pull in their elders, and create that that piece for their tribe that would be put into the report. Or whether it's, they need, community members need travel costs or the like. And the second piece that subcommittee will be working on is also what are additional outstanding needs of the work itself. So do we need to have fellowships for research, for example? Do we need to have bigger investment in communications, which Decolonizing Wealth will already be covering a bigger communications campaign. So that should already be taken care of. But that's just something to think about because we'll be talking about it in just a moment. The Youth Council will then have the same opportunity and would want to get some feedback from the public. The Elders Council, the Academic Partnerships, the Status and Identity Subcommittee, the Education Subcommittee, and the Deliverables Subcommittee. And all of these are going to look different depending on what the community needs are in those spaces. We'll then talk about the regular meeting structure, which the council will move into in the next, in March, as I mentioned, locations and topics, and then we'll talk about the next meeting date and topics, and then we'll have public comment, which will typically start right at 3. But depending on how comment goes throughout the agenda, we may also go a bit over time on that or under time. So I'm going to go back to the presentation. Okay. And apologies for any technical issues. As you can probably tell, I am not in my normal office. I am in Southern California. And okay, can you see that, Loretta?
Yeah, we're good.
Awesome. So again, over the next several months, we're working with the council and subcommittees to finalize state and third-party contracts to do the work, provide training and tools for the council and the public to participate in this process, developing draft strategic planning documents, drafting additional policies and procedures as needed for the work of the council, building out subcommittee work and work product, and developing communications and web-based materials. In 2022, subject to COVID-19 constraints, the council will begin its regular quarterly meetings. So I'm going to say, let me see if I can change how I view this. Okay, I can see some faces now. So for all of you, this is supposed to be a discussion portion. And so if you take the little bar in the middle of the screen and slide it over, you can see some faces. And that way, right now I just lost control of my, okay, there we go, presentation. What we'd like to hear in this space is any thoughts from the community, but I'm going to go ahead and give you a quick update on the partnership that we just announced on Indigenous Peoples Day. And let me get my view. Okay, well, let me just stop sharing because I clearly can't manage all of these different windows at the same time. So we're going to talk about really quick funding partnerships. And so we just announced on Indigenous Peoples Day a partnership between our office and the Decolonizing Wealth Project for activities and responsibilities with respect to philanthropic engagement for the development of specialized communications and storytelling deliverables for the council itself. So this is broken up into a couple of different pieces, but part of what the Decolonizing Wealth Project will be helping the council to do is engage with the funding subcommittee and also leveraging its experiences and relationships with the funder community to convene and facilitate a group of California-focused philanthropists and donors to build relationships and serve as ambassadors for the work of the council across the philanthropic sector. Develop and execute a grant-making program to support the engagement of Native families in the healing opportunities presented in this process and advance broader objectives of the council. And galvanize philanthropy to support the recommendations from the council's report. So those are those recommendations for reparation. So if the council recommends that, there be a land buyback program or a land donation program, philanthropy could help support some of those initiatives. The second piece of what Decolonizing Wealth Project will be doing is offering narrative change and digital storytelling. Their team of communications and social impact strategists will lead, produce, and direct the delivery of a two-part communications effort, which will be comprised of strategic narrative change campaign designed to bring awareness to the council's truth and healing work, and also advocate for truth and healing action in California and in other spaces. And then also a documentary piece to highlight the council's journey toward truth and healing. Another piece of what they'll be doing is healing and wellness. And so they'll, throughout this entire process, we're going to have conversations and themes that require trauma-informed resources and care for council members and other California Native peoples who participate in the process. And so what Decolonizing Wealth will be doing is bringing together healing partners from across California to ensure that there's adequate support and emotional support for for participants and the council. And priority will be given to California Native American-led healing organizations and groups, because that's basically what this council is about, and also is about supporting California Native-led initiatives. So they'll be creating and funding a healer collaborative, coaching and technical assistance support for the Healer Collaborative, and then we'll support the statewide convenings of the Healer Collaborative and other activities. So they'll be within the annual, the quarterly meetings as well to help support the council and participants. So that is the big update for this subcommittee. And I know that that was a lot of information. So if folks have questions on that partnership, we're happy to chat about them. But it really is basically a partnership where we're hoping that they can help all of you engage fully, and then also help the council as it works through all of this, or the council members as they work through all of this, to make sure that we're not just we're not opening up traumatic feelings, traumatic responses, but that we're actually working through and healing and addressing the deep-seated trauma so that we can all heal collectively to build something better and brighter for the future. Loretta, I'm going to pause at this point and see if you have anything to add here.
No, I don't have anything to add right now.
Okay, great. So the funding subcommittee is most interested, I think, at this time in hearing about, again, as we've mentioned in other listening sessions, what are the priority needs, or even just the regular needs of all of you in engaging in the work of the council. So assuming that we're moving forward with in-person meetings in March, which could be hybrid if we have COVID conditions continuing, what are the types of supports that all of you might need in being able to attend those meetings? And what are also some ideas of some of the things that the council should be doing that it hasn't set up yet and that should be getting funded as well? So I'm gonna let that kind of sit with folks for a bit. And if folks have thoughts or ideas, we'd love to hear them. And if you've dialed in, it's *6 to unmute your line. But if you're on the app, you can just go ahead and unmute, and we'd love to hear from you. And for those of you that don't want to speak in this group setting, you can also directly message me or Loretta, or you can also just message the group if that's more comfortable for you. I'm not quite sure I understand this question, but the council is supported by the legislature. They added funding for the council's work. And so the legislature has expressed support for the work, though there isn't like an overarching legislative mandate here. Mm-hmm. Kathy, did you have something you wanted to say?
Haley, good morning, or rather good afternoon. I just wanted to speak a little bit. I don't know if this is something that this collaboration could address, but many of you know that Chumney Elder Marie Wilcox passed on the day after Native American Day, actually. And she was very much a leader in the development of saving languages. And she was also a member of the Wik-Chumney, which is a non-recognized tribe, either state or federally. I think it would be really a tribute to her. She dedicated her entire life to preserving the Wik-Chumney language, of which she was the only fluid speaker for a very long time. And I think it would be great that the state of California could possibly honor her and all of her work toward preserving, not only her language, but encouraging others to preserve their languages as well by creating an annual language conference that would be in her name and in her honor. I think it would be a great idea for the state of California, to assist with. And, it's just a huge loss to our community, not only as an elder, but, as a preserver of the language and the culture. She was also a basket weaver. So I think that, to take that under consideration would be great for this committee to do. And I do know her daughter, Jennifer Malone, and Evelyn Malone. And so, if there would be anything that needed to be talked with about them, they would be great connections for that type of event. So anyway, please consider that, and that will be my contribution for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. That's a wonderful idea. So we really appreciate your thoughts on that. Any additional thoughts? Let's see. I'm missing the chat, it looks like. Teddy is saying, I'm wondering how we might be able to connect people from the philanthropic community with these efforts and how we can support with education and engagement of those people so that they don't engage with the council or decolonizing wealth in harmful ways, but would rather the space be for folks to share their thoughts on where funds should be targeted first. I think that's actually, this is the place to say it, Teddy. So, and again, that said too, as a note, if you have thoughts on anything that we're not talking about right now, you can just say them as well. We don't want to tell you how to engage with this council, but connecting people from the philanthropic community with these efforts, I think that decolonizing wealth is thinking about how to manage that as well. And one of the things that we had talked about in previous listening sessions was also who are good partners to bring in that can help bridge that cultural gap of getting folks who are not from the community or who are not engaged in the work in a way where they might know how to respectfully engage. How can we get them the tools they need to engage in the work so that it's not disrespectful and not pulling away from or re-traumatizing Native participants? So if folks have ideas about organizations that have been good at kind of bridging those gaps and communicating with non-Native folks in a way that doesn't feel like, or that doesn't inspire defensiveness, but inspires learning and growth, I think we would love to hear about that so that we can get those folks on our team as well to help both philanthropy, but then other people who just want to help engage in the work. It also, and Loretta, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like Kathleen might have been on as well. And so if Kathleen, if you're on, if you'd like to unmute your line and share a couple thoughts, no pressure though. It's *6 to unmute your line.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't join by Zoom, but was having trouble earlier figuring out how to unmute myself. So just enjoying listening to the conversation and really excited about the partnership with Decolonizing Wealth Project and thinking with Edgar Villanueva and his team about how philanthropy might be leveraged to help advance the healing process. And we are really excited to learn from the council and to, I think Decolonizing Wealth Project, as Christina mentioned, is really eager to follow the lead of the council in terms of the various recommendations that emerge from the process and to play very much a supportive role however we can. So really excited to hear about any ways that others might think that philanthropy can support this process and what a grant making process might look like to support the work of the Truth and Healing Council. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathleen. And for those of you, some of you I think already know Kathleen, but that was Kathleen Kelly-Janis. She's the Senior Advisor for Social Innovation in the Governor's Office and has been really instrumental in this administration in partnering private funding, philanthropy, and other partners with government to have more impact on the initiatives that we all think are important to do, but also to carry out things at a pace and at a scale that is almost impossible for government to do on its own. So we really appreciate her joining us today. And if folks have questions on that, she is on as well. I've got another question in the chat that was a direct message, but is, I think easy for me to answer for the whole group. And it's asking if the council's considered moving the meetings around the state to make it easier for people to attend the in-person meetings. And so that is something that will be happening. The meetings will be taking place in the different regions of the state. And Loretta and I were just talking today about what does that look like in terms of weather. So we, as an initial meeting, are planning on doing the first meeting in Sacramento just because that's kind of a good launching point. And we can pull together a lot of resources here and build out a lot of programming here. And we can get to that in a minute. But so logically, that means that the spring meeting will be, which is in March, will be held by the Eastern, in the Eastern region, since Sacramento is part of that in our council. The next meeting, the June meeting, we're planning on being the Northern California region, given that it's, I think, just before fire season and also before wet season as well. So it's kind of a good time of the year for folks to go up north. And then the last two, I think we're kind of open to what folks are thinking, but the September and the December will either be the central or the southern, depending on how the central and the southern groups want to take those on, and whether September feels better for central, which is, again, the Central District of California, which is basically Santa Barbara down to around Temecula area, and then southern is Imperial and San Diego counties. So depending on what the weather looks like, I think those are both kind of movable. Any other thoughts on the funding subcommittee and priorities that would be good for this subcommittee to hear? And also, if you want to think about it, we also welcome your engagement on Friday with the full council when they start talking through some of these things. Okay. I'm going to move to the next subcommittee then. And that is the Youth Council. So as I've mentioned in the past, the Youth Council is wanting to do kind of a kickoff week of youth events. So similar to some of the things we've done for census and for Get Out the Vote and for COVID. So if you have ideas about how that looks, or if you have people that might be good to engage in that space, we'd love to hear from you, because we're open to anybody who you think might get traction with the youth. And we'll be doing a virtual kickoff for them to, oh, this is great, perfect. Humboldt Area Foundation and Seventh Generation are very supportive organizations, and we like them too. So we will definitely be working with them as well. And so for the Youth Council, we're really just interested in thinking about how best to engage the youth, whether there are existing youth programs that we should just be leveraging, or if we should be creating something new. So very much open to hearing from all of you on that. The next subcommittee, and Loretta, if you ever have anything you want to add, feel free to jump in.
One thing
is,
I want to
add
for the youth subcommittee is, and I don't know if you just mentioned I was kind of multitasking right now, but they are considering doing like a kickoff event, which of course in the Zoom era, it's hard to get the youth, to sit in front of their computer when they're doing that most of the day anyway. But would like to hear the community's input on maybe the timing of a kickoff event or any ideas for engagement. That would be helpful. Just how to really engage the youth. Any sort of ideas would be helpful.
Yeah, like what are they even like is what we want to know. And because really the Youth Council, what we're anticipating is that it will kind of self-govern. And so it may have priorities and insights that none of us have thought about, or it may want to run itself in a way that's completely different from what has been anticipated by the council. So we're very interested in getting as many youth as possible from across California and Indian country to weigh in and engage meaningfully in this work. And we're getting some comments. NCIDC has a youth program, and the Yurok tribe just received some funds for education. So we can talk to Councilmember Myers a bit about that, I think. And great. Good, we're getting some really good feedback in the chat. Thank you all for fully utilizing this platform. And the Karuk tribe as well. Loretta, come on. Loretta is the former general counsel for Karuk, so we'll have her reach out as well. Casey Family Programs. Oh yeah, we can talk to Sheldon and Nikwa. Great, this is really great. Really appreciate all this good insight. Thank you all. Native Youth Justice of LA is active. Awesome. Great, because also Native youth in California are engaging in a world that's completely different from the world that all of us engaged in. And so we would really love to hear what their thoughts and ideas are about how they view the changes that need to happen. Stephanie, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's a proposed options or format of what this youth council will look like. I'm a little behind, so I apologize if there already is something like that. And if not, maybe proposing a couple of structures to the youth. But in order to engage youth, I think, of course, youth respond really well, of course, to social media and gift cards. I don't know if there's money in the budget for that, but to participate in the scoping session, if you give them options about what a youth council could look like, as well as if none of these work, what are their ideas? I think that there are plenty of tribes who have some successful youth councils with a structure. It all depends on regions though too, because we have both urban and rural youth. And so being able to present some options that combine both, I think are a really good opportunity. And then utilizing somebody well-known, if that's possible, to grab the youth. I know up here and up north, they're utilizing, sorry, I'm having construction going on. One of the members of 1491 for their youth conference. So something like that.
So you're saying we should get Dallas up in here. Okay.
Welcome to
That's
enter
great.
your meeting ID followed by pound.
Okay, these are all wonderful ideas. So we'll keep it open a bit in case folks have more ideas. And you can also add it in the chat, which we're also keeping track of as well. And then specific to Sacramento, are there places that make sense for youth to convene in Sacramento? Because I think ideally we'd want them to also be meeting in conjunction with the council's first meeting in March. And so I'm going a bit off agenda, but what we've been thinking about for Sacramento is having, the big talking circle potentially at the site of the future Indian Heritage Center, which is also where the governor gave his apology. And that will give folks an opportunity to see where that's at, hear more about that project as well, but also be in a space that we're hoping will be a future gathering place for Native people from across California generally. And then we're thinking of having the hearing style day 2 in a place that has capabilities for more hybrid communication and can stream out to the whole community. What we're thinking though about these quarterly meetings is that this is a real opportunity to engage the public generally, but then also participants in unearthing the truth about that location. And so what we'd like to do and what we'd like to hear some ideas about are how do we catalyze the community to do more of this truth telling. So for Sacramento specifically, we're going to be talking to the Parks Department to talk about, is there, an opportunity to have a day of truth telling at places like Sutter's Fort, at places like the Indian Museum that's at Sutter's Fort? Are there interpretive things that we can do throughout Sacramento that can be a part of this bigger public truth telling? Are there museums that we can have focus on certain things for the days surrounding the Truth and Healing Council, so that when people come to town, they can also learn the real story of Sacramento? And are there people that we should be talking to from the community that are specifically, skilled in telling that story? So, obviously the local tribes we want to bring into that space to tell their stories as they feel appropriate. And what are other pieces in Sacramento where we tell the real story of the gold rush, for example, rather than, the glorified story that a lot of our children get when they come for their, 6th grade trip up to Sacramento. And so just putting that out there, that I think for each of the regional meetings, that's what we'd like to do is, and I am jumping ahead on the agenda, but we'd like to catalyze the community to help us plan around these meetings. Similar to what other national organizations do, where the community knows the community best. So like, for example, if we have in June, we have the North Coast or the Northern California meeting, where are the places that are significant to the tribal community in the North? And what are the things that we should be also partnering with other people to be telling the truth about those places, so that it's more of not just a meeting, but really like a moment for people from everywhere to start thinking through the truth of that place. So I'll stop talking. Loretta, do you have anything to add on that?
No, nothing else to add about that. There's a question in the chat about the age range of the youth council, and that hasn't been set yet. And I think the youth committee or subcommittee is interested in hearing the community's feedback on, what exactly is a youth. And we've heard from everyone, it's like you have every possible range is what we've heard, but just want to see what the majority of folks, define a youth as, and what age range would be most appropriate.
And part of that conversation is like, what is the design of the youth council? So, does the community think that this should be a council that is mentoring the future leaders of California, or the future, like Truth and Healing Council, if it stays beyond the 5-year or the however many years now it is, beyond the term? So is it basically like we're mentoring young youth to then be, teen leaders in these spaces, and then creating kind of like a structure like that? Or is it really just, a model that looks just like the council of, 12 to 18 or 18 to 24? See, it's already getting complicated when we talk about it. So we would welcome any thoughts. And I think part of us wanting to do the youth and the subcommittee wanting to do youth convening is actually asking the youth, what do they want to do with this, so. Okay, I'm going to touch on the other subcommittees, because the next one, we actually have a member of the council here. And that's Kathy, would you like to share?
Yes. To get back to the contacts for possibly having youth participation, I think maybe Shannon Rivers in the Los Angeles area. I know that he recently accepted a position as the Director of Programming for the American Indian Resurgence Initiative through the Office of Indian Education. And I think maybe he would have some good contacts with youth, or be able to develop those that might bring some people, to the circle that are younger people. So that's just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate that. And keep them coming if folks have thoughts as we move through other subcommittees. And this is great in the chat. We're getting some good feedback. Thank you all. The next subcommittee is the Elders Subcommittee. And so they've met and talked a bit about what they might want to do with the Elders Subcommittee. And part of it, and a major priority that we're hearing, is capturing elders' first person stories and narratives of their lives that may not be in existence anywhere, and may not even be known by their own families. So one of the things that we've heard as a priority from the subcommittee is going out to communities or empowering communities to capture those stories, either in writing or recording, of their elders, to be put into the context of this council. And what we've thought about is starting with a few target populations. So we know, for example, Tuolumne has a really well-developed elders program and elders center that we could even empower them to do on their own if they're not comfortable talking to us or to the council, and have the elders start creating that body of first person storytelling that will go directly into this council. We've also discussed a bit the place of elders within the context of the quarterly meetings and how they would engage in that space, and whether it's, you know, an opening and closing type of framing of those meetings, so that everyone understands that, you know, we're in a continuum and that we really are shaped by the wisdom and the work and the generations of advocacy of our elders, or whether there's even, you know, a space on the agenda for elders from the community to just share. So we're kind of open to all of that. And Loretta, I'm probably missing a ton, and Councilmember Lucas, if you have anything to add, would love to hear from both of you on the Elders Committee.
Discussed with the Elders Subcommittee is figuring out ways to, like Christina mentioned, like really involving the elders, and how important it is to kind of meet them where they are at, as far as getting, you know, gathering testimony and getting their input, just kind of leaving space and flexibility about how to do that. So I think we would be open to hearing your thoughts and ideas on that. But other than that, I think you covered it. And Councilmember Lucas, if you have more to add, please feel free.
Yeah. Not a whole lot. I think I pretty well talked it out, but I have been thinking, you know, what is an elder? That's really one of the things that I'd like to know. What is the general populace conception of what an elder is to them? I'm concerned, you know, number one, I need to remind everybody I'm 86, okay? So when you're 86 years old, 100 years isn't all that long ago. So I can still smell the old fires and the old wood stoves and, you know, carrying water and all of that kind of stuff, which is very foreign to the younger generations that we have today. I'm concerned that we're losing some personal stories of people that might be my age or around my age who were actually witnesses to, like I said, the termination thing. There's some excellent testimony in that, and I've only begun to read it, but if there's anybody who's has a, excuse me, that's my stupid phone. There, I got it shut off. Thank you. I guess what I'm interested in is if there's anybody around who participated in that, or who has a grandparent who participated in that, or even a parent. I think it's really important that they share their story as to what promises were made, what promises were not kept, and where are those people today? Where are those reservations today? You know, like some of them gave up a lot of land for assignments. What happened to that land when those people died? Did that get passed on to their heirs, or was that something that reverted back to the federal government? There's a lot of technical clarification for me personally that I'd like to know, but I really think it's important that we capture those stories, good, bad, or indifferent. I know some folks don't really want to talk about some of their past history because it is truly demoralizing. But I find the more you talk about that, the more healing comes from that, and a better attitude begins to evolve. And that's really one of the things that I'd like to see us kind of capture, is how do we get this to the record so that it is corrected, but also process something where something good comes out of all of this. So that's basically where I'm at, just off the top of my head. So again, if whoever's listening to all of this, if you got folks out there, convince them not to be uncomfortable, but jump off the edge and just share your comments and thoughts with us. I think that's really important.
Thank you, Councilmember Lucas. And in the chat, we also have some suggestions about different Elders Council and programs that can be a good resource, which we would love to hear more of these, because what we'd like to do is have those that have those strong programs. We can start with them and see what's working and what's not working. And then we can import that model into different communities where elders are naturally gathering. So very much appreciate these suggestions. And then something that Councilmember Lucas mentioned that I think is going to be so critical to this work and the recommendations for reparation and restoration are those first person narratives of what happened when people tried to fix stuff and what didn't work. And so, for example, with the allotments and with the privatization of lands that were previously in trust, what didn't work there and why didn't it work? Because if we have recommendations aimed at restoration and reparation that do the same exact thing, then we're just creating the cycle and contributing to it. So, you know, when we think about things like land buybacks or land donations, what were the things before that didn't make that work? And like, why didn't that work? A lot of times we know it was, you know, taxes. And so people lost their land because when it came time to pay taxes for property in private ownership, that wasn't available. And so those lands then got reverted in some cases. So I think the lived experience of our Native elders that have seen the government try a bunch of different strategies, that's going to be so critical to the next steps and making sure that we're not repeating the mistakes of the past. Let's see. First person stories that are recorded, transcribed, and written. NPR has a great model called Storycorps. Oh, I love that. So that's one of the things that we're working on, is at least getting some of the technology so that we can either go out to the community and have those stories captured, or we can empower the community to capture those stories themselves. Because again, we know that we might not always be trusted receivers of people's stories, but maybe there are sisters, family members, community members that elders might be more comfortable talking to. So this is really a wonderful, video files would be wonderful too. Oh, great. So we'll send you an address for this. Let me connect you. Sorry, I'm in the chat.
I don't know that you can do that.
Councilmember Lucas, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to re-amplify what you mentioned on the land. I'm really concerned about the land that was put on reservations as either an assignment or an allotment, and how those lands have processed through the last 100 years, and most importantly, since the 1950s when termination took place. I just would like to see what would you call that, a trail of ownership?
Change of title. Change of title.
So again?
Change of title.
A change of title, you know, if I'm concerned that we might have been pushed into an illusion where we thought it was good to own property when in fact it was probably the worst thing that ever happened to us. And so those are the things that I want to bring out without creating more hate and discontent. It's just that the process has caused something, but it's that inadvertent discovery, so to speak. You don't know, 20 years later, you find out it was bad for you. It's just like recently they're telling us old folks don't take aspirin anymore because it's not good for you. So, you know, it's that kind of information that I'm after. What can we learn from that so that the future generations aren't put in a position to where we inadvertently, through our own fault, because we're not quite as, I don't want to say this, that's not true. I wanted to say that we're not quite knowledgeable as some of the other people, but some of us aren't. You know, we've been locked up on reservations for over 300 years in this country. So there's a lot, and I don't mind saying this, and somebody will take offense to it, but nonetheless, I find it true. There's a lot we don't know, and the public continues to move faster. You're all involved in technology, but there's always that 10% that isn't involved in technology. So it's those kinds of things that I'd like us to collectively gather that information, see what we can do to make something good come out of it, particularly for future generations. We can't just be wrapping ourselves up in anger, but we need to find good, happy, positive solutions. So I hope that makes sense, does it?
That's wonderful. Everything you say is like the most profound thing in this space. So we really appreciate you, Councilmember Lucas. And I think that, and again, not to, you know, hammer it in too much, but I do think that that is so critical, is the lessons learned piece, where we say like, this thing didn't work, so we need to stop, not remembering that it didn't work and move on to a different option. Because I know at least in the previous federal administration, there were some, you know, chatter about privatizing Indian lands and having that be a thing that happens again, where instead of like the federal government holding things in trust, which again also has its own problems, that we should just privatize everything, and then tribes can go full capitalist and do all this stuff. And I think we heard that before about 100 years ago, and it didn't work out for tribes so well. So I think, you know, when we hear these things in successive waves in history, where we're just kind of going back and forth between policies that continue to just like act like a saw for tribes, and we're whittling down what we have. So, you know, I think that elders piece is going to be one of the most critical pieces of, you know, what are actions that are actually not going to make it worse, and what are actions that did make it worse but sounded really good at the time. So other thoughts, comments? I know Kathy, your hand was raised, it's now down, but if you had something you wanted to add, you can. And Councilmember Lucas, if you'd like to.
Hello. I wanted to say too, regarding both the elders issues and the land issues, Marie Wilcox also has an allotment to which she's been unable to gain access to, her family. And it is an area for gathering basket materials. And also, I think they want to establish a memorial garden there. But they have no access to it through easements of other properties around it. And that's something that the family's been working on for close to 20 years with California Indian Legal Services. So I think that these kinds of issues, I mean, they are really important. And, you know, the fact that some people's allotments cannot be accessed easily is also an issue that could be addressed with a committee of this council. So I would just like to include that. Thank you.
One of the things that I'm not real clear on, I think I have a little bit of knowledge of it, but I understand, and if there's anybody out there who really knows this process, can add to it, it'd really be helpful. But I understand there were allotments that went to certain individuals. Some of those allotments are within a reservation. So, you know, that little piece, if there's some friction between the tribe and the allotment, I understand when you got an allotment that you were no longer a ward of the government. This was a lot of years ago. I don't know, maybe all that has changed since then, but that kind of puts you outside of that tribal socialization. So it's those little pieces of property that I'm wondering if that allotment person has since passed away, what has happened to that. I know eventually I think there were 20 years ago, I'd learned that sitting in Congress because nobody could make a decision on it was an acre of property with 32 owners because it just, continued to go to the heirs, but there was no way of splitting it up. So those are the kinds of things that I'm concerned with, but I'm also learning about this assignment thing. I think it's similar to allotments within a reservation. So again, if that elder passed away or if there was somebody who was part of the termination process who took an assignment and they're still alive who would care to share their stories, I think they would really be helpful to understand what has happened to those little pieces of property that sit within reservations. If there's any of them still there, are they under the ownership of the American Indians or were they sold to outsiders? So anyway, I'm not sure I'm expressing my real concern in that, but I do think it's a foggy area that I may be the only one in the fog. Maybe everybody else knows what's going on, but I'm one of those that is still locked up on a reservation, so to speak. So there's a lot I've said so often, there's a lot I don't know, but it would be helpful to understand that. So again, it's a plea to have the community come forward and talk about their own history. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think Councilmember Lucas, we're all in the same fog in California Indian country where the policy has been so all over the place that it's like, it's hard to even capture. And so, as you were speaking, I was thinking about how California really needs to get its story right in terms of how to plug into the federal resources that are like just re-upped. Like the Interior Department just announced that they're going to again do a land consolidation program like they did in the Obama administration, where there are basically buying back land to put back into trust and are having settlements with those individual fractionated allottees. So like if you have 1/64th of an allotment, all of you get the funds from that allotment and then that land goes back into the trust for the tribe, so that also we don't have situations like down in Agua Caliente where it's like just complete checkerboarding and it's like a real mess. So I think you've hit the nail on the head on something that like California really needs to look at it from a California lens, especially given how lands happened here, because it seems like either there was just no real like organized approach or it was a sophisticated approach that was designed to be confusing.
I just want to add one more thing. We wrap ourselves up in a lot of stuff that tells the world around us we're Indians, but the basic ingredient of who we are, and I think I mentioned this before, is it the Indian that makes the Indianness, or is it the reservation? But none of that really is. It's the culture, and our culture truly is the land. And it's not artifacts like cultural resource management companies think it is. It is truly the landscape and our intellect that was knowledgeable enough to live with that land and to understand the rhythm of it. And that's what I want to kind of bring together. So I don't want us losing it anymore. And I think it was a deliberate effort on the United States government to chop it up because there's more Indians in California. The diversity of us, the intellect of our people who understood physics, chemistry, geology, all of that, long before those were words in this country. So that's really the ingredient that I'd like to see put to record and to correct this historic record. And we can only do that with the help of these elders if they're still around and care to share their story, even if they're still angry. To hell with it. Say you're angry and then tell your story. And then let's heal together.
Thank you, council member. I love that. And I think also a broader, more public facing knowledge of the way that typically, and I'm not going to speak for every single tribe, but like the tribes that I have some knowledge of identify themselves based on their relation to the land. And I don't know that people understand that either. You know, that a lot of us identify as people of the earth, of the place where we're from, and that we come from that earth, not that it's like somewhere that we just inhabit and that we own, but that we are part of it. So I really love all those sentiments and think you're just spot on where we need to go with all of this. So really appreciate all of that wisdom and insight. Kathy, you have a raised hand. Would you like to add something?
Hilly. I would like to say that the Allotment Act of 1887 has been really a complicating and sometimes horrific factor in our unity as California Indians, because the rancherias in particular were established for all homeless Indian people. And then in terms of the Allotment Act, a lot of the constitutions of individual tribes within California include one having to have an allotment or be descended from an allottee in terms of their tribal membership as members of federally recognized tribes. And this has been one of the factors used to disenroll many people within California Indian tribes. And, that division and dissension that the policy was undoubtedly, in retrospect, developed to provide has been such a negative influence on Indian country, specifically in California, with who is and is not Indian, according to, the political aspects of tribal membership. So I just wanted to add that because I'm not sure everybody really recognizes how much that allotment issue plays into the division that we have today within our tribal communities. So thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a really important and salient point, and is also a mechanism of colonizing societies to create infighting. Like we see it internationally in a lot of different places, like in Africa and other communities where divisions that didn't exist are then imposed on communities. And then it creates this infighting and lateral violence that makes it impossible for us to get anything done together. So I really appreciate that point and think it's something that is very much worth this council thinking about the impacts and how we can address those impacts through the recommendations of the council. So we are at time and I want to be mindful of that. But we do have another meeting if folks want to join us for dinner on Wednesday at 6. So we will see you all then. If you'd like to think about some of the things we talked about or add anything. And then what we would really love is if you could join the council on Friday and have these same conversations as we go through the different subcommittees and think about really what we should be getting from those subcommittee works, the work of those subcommittees, but then also what are the bigger things that this council should be looking at, and particularly in the context of the deliverables committee, they want to be thinking about what are the real actions that we can be taking, which I think is really linked to this conversation we're having today about elders and what hasn't worked and what was an attempt to work or maybe not, and what ended up being destructive but being sold as something that was like, the solution. And so I think it'll be really important for all of you to be thinking about all of this and what is really going to be the most impactful thing for this council to be doing as it thinks through reparations and restoration. So any final thoughts from anybody before we sign off for today? Okie doke. Well, thank you all for your time. We really appreciate it. And we will see you soon. Take care, everyone.